Right, so Mastering Pack Guardian is fast approaching, but we do have a good chunk of the spoilers to go through. And when I say chunk, I mean the meaningful stuff, mostly the legendaries and the majestics. But I think we're missing one-ish legendary, four-ish majestics, which we should see in the next week or so, and then the week after that will actually be the release of Mastery Pack Guardian. But it is going to be a heavily limited focus set, showcasing crack shuffle play, Guardian x Guardian matchups, Valder x Valder matchups. So yeah, not a lot of the cards are actually going to translate out of that, just like a usual set. Well, less so because it's, a mini set. But yeah, we're going to go through the legendaries and the majestics we have currently, but there's also very, very interesting discussion going on that I do definitely want to touch on. And it to me, sort of showcases as well how popular a class like Assassin is versus that of Guardian being sort of left field or a little bit under the radar. So milling is going to feature somewhat heavily, right, in Mastery Pack Guardian. So it is obviously a direct comparison to make because for so long, Assassin has sort of been the poster child for milling. So milling, the act of destroying your opponent's deck more so than anything else, right? Usually done through Assassin's contract ability, or tied to, I should say, their contracts. Since contract itself is just sort of a check looking to banish X card, and then if you do, you get silver. But generally speaking, contract in Assassin is not good, right? Milling in Assassin is not good. So generally speaking, again, Assassin being very popular, being more played, I would assume, than Guardian, the general thought is that it's not so good in Guardian, but the proper discussion is more so milling in a mid-range deck versus that of milling in a fatigue deck, because as Guardian, you can take a very defensive fatigue deck where milling does get surprisingly better. But we'll start off with Assassin. So yeah, why is milling horrible in Assassin? Well, because it has no real immediate impact. So the idea of destroying your opponent's deck, right, to disrupt them, again, in aggro to mid-range, doesn't work because Flesh and Blood is a game of value. So you don't have all your eggs in a singular basket, right? It's not a game where you're trying to line up a certain series of cards to then act as your win condition. Rather, you're trying to craft your deck so every time you draw up, you have a really good value hand across all the cards you're playing. So yeah, the idea of destroying a card that your opponent is yet to draw, that they won't draw until the end of their next turn, has no immediate impact on the game and therefore has no real value to it, right? So yeah, in Assassin, as it currently stands, unless we get a real, Riptide-ish Assassin that's focused on fatiguing, means that contracts and milling is always perceived as horrible, right? And even the act of completing a contract and getting silver is also not really good. So the idea there is silver then becomes this valuable resource to do X thing with, and mostly that's buyback equipment, and that is definitely really, really nice. The ability to buy back X equipment and reuse its effect is definitely really, really good, especially, take a look at their leg piece, which is an assassin attack gets go again, right? That being reusable is absolutely fantastic because go again has somewhat of a premium to it, right? To the point where to make it better, they've just baked it into Arachne, right? But yeah, so the idea there is you land your contracts, you get your silver, and every 2 silver buys you back a piece of equipment. Problem is, it's still awful to hit because, well, you have the whims of randomness, right? Your opponent's deck is their deck, not yours. So you don't really know what you're hitting and you can't try to align things. You can, through Arachne's ability, make it a little bit better. Whenever you play a card with contract, you may look at the top card of target opponent's deck and you may put it to the bottom. But that in itself is also pretty flat, right? Because you see a card you like, sure, it stays there. You see a card you don't like, it's just another roll of the dice, right? So, I don't know, I feel like if Arachne's ability had slightly more range to compare it back to Righteous Cleansing, which I didn't really discuss, and we'll get to that in a second, which was that Guardian milling card, right, would have been a bit more effective if you could see the top 2 cards, put 1 to the bottom. I don't know, something like that would have been interesting. But yeah, so generally speaking, there's just not enough value there. There's too much RNG involved, and again, hitting the top of your opponent's deck has no immediate impact like Arsenal or Hand Disruption that Assassin definitely clings to, right, in its other forms. Now, the other question is cycling with silver. And to be honest, it's also just really bad in Assassin. Assassin is probably the one class where you don't want to get rid of your blues because they're either super impactful or exactly what you need to go into your daggers and everything else, right? So yeah, you have a card like Surgical Extraction. So the idea there is you could pitch a blue into a silver to cycle that card and try to look for something better. But the problem is the majority of blues in Assassin are already really good cards that you don't want to get rid of, right? You have a Surgical Extraction, you're not thinking, cool, I can now cycle this and hope I get something better. No, I'm going to play that surgical instruction, right? I'm going to play those bonds, those persuasive prognosis. So yeah, silver also really drops off in that regard. So unfortunately, milling in assassin, in contract, awful. But that doesn't mean it is bad in Guardian. Now, we might as well approach the subject of, again, making it a little bit better. So obviously, Cashin would have been a fantastic card, or was a fantastic card in contract, because it's a boost to momentum, but obviously it's very busted in a lot of other heroes, so I know something like that back would definitely be really nice, or even a card like Knick-Knack Bric-a-Brac that was just significantly better, right? I think the easiest way to make Knick-Knack Bric-a-Brac good is have it hit the inventory rather than the deck. That way you don't have to take the items in your deck, and that would be significantly better. Fortunately, at the time of its creation, Everfest inventory wasn't yet a concept, right? So yeah, I think that would actually be really good if you just had more meaningful uses for silver, because again, cycling's out, and I think the equipment's a bit too hefty, but I think all the equipment being 2 silver to buy back is a bit too hefty, because you do have quite the contrast in its effect. So something like Shriek Razor, which is pay 1 to use it, that's already quite the hefty cost, so if it was 1 silver to buy it back, not so bad. Mask of Perdition, again, you need to sort of speed up the rate at which Assassin mills to make it more relevant to a mid-range deck, so that being 1 could have also been nice. Obviously Black Tex or the daggers, the Gravens, being 2 silver I think is fine, but yeah, if we get that side of the value aspect, maybe it gets a little better. But on to Guardian. So in Guardian, you have the ability to take a lot of defensive cards and therefore be able to fatigue your opponent, create that war of attrition, and have milling actually become a meaningful effect. So, Righteous Cleansing has a crush effect. When you deal 4 or more damage, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck, banish 1 or more cards with the same name from among them, and then put the rest to the top of their deck. So, not only do you get to see the top 5 cards, you get to shape it a little bit, and you have that possibility of hitting 1 to 3 cards to, again, mill them. Right? So in a class that can fatigue, take things to late game, it is definitely a lot more relevant, right? So yeah, to just show off some tankiness, right? You've got Staunch Response, you've got a lot of high block value cards that you can just pitch into, and of course we have the new shield coming out, or just shields in general, being a very much Guardian thing, where they feature a hefty amount of block. Right? And then on the actual current side, we have new cards like Leave a Dent and Grind Them Down, right? Which you might look at and go, these aren't that great, but they really are in Guardian. So Leave a Dent, your next Guardian attack this turn gets crushed when this deals 4 or more damage to a hero. Destroy the top 4 cards of the deck, right? That is a blue that could potentially get rid of 12 cards from your opponent, right? Almost 20% of their deck if it's just a 60-card deck. So that for fatigue is bonkers, right? And then even a card like Grind Them Down, which is a common in the set. Crush. When this deals 4 or more damage to a hero, destroy the top card of the deck. As Valda, it's perfect because you want to hit 3 Seismic Surge, and then Grind Them Down is a 0/7 dominate, meaning that all those other cards you can use to set up your next turn or block defensively on your opponent's turn. And again, as a fatigue class like Guardian, it's just going to pay off a lot more. So yeah, when it comes to milling in Guardian, it is obviously significantly better than it is in Assassin, and needs to work significantly less to have that impact, because you don't care that it doesn't have an immediate impact because you're going for that long con, that war of attrition, right? And then in terms of the new cards, I think we might just hold off a little bit until we get the rest of them again. There's only a few spoilers to go, but I think we will basically look at how Guardian is handling the same sort of effects that Assassin has access to, being milling and discard effects. So in terms of milling, we have Leave a Dent and Grind Them Down, which we've just looked at, right? So even Majestic and Common, these are still really valuable cards for that fatigue strategy. So Leave a Dent is definitely a really standout card. Again, just has the potential to hit so many cards, being a blue pitchable that is also 3 block. Grind Them Down definitely has some relevancy, just being a nice stat line that can, again, have some level of effect on the fatigue game. But 2 other new cards, Peck Perfect and Daily Grind. So for Peck Perfect, whenever a card defends this, which is already, to me, an insane line of words, right? Clash with the defending hero, the winner destroys the top card of the other hero's deck. So every time your opponent defends, equipment, a card from hand, a defense reaction, Peck Perfect will trigger and you will clash. So yeah, this has the potential to hit a ton of cards, making it pretty nuts as Victor, right? That is a ton of clashes that you can try and win. And again, you lose one, you destroy the top card of your deck, and then you have another roll of that. It is really, really solid, and then even better in Victor, of course, being clash-centric. So it is a really, really cool attack. 5 for 9, 3 blocks, so it's still useful in that case. And, you know, somewhat synergistically, it lines up with how Daily Grind works. So Daily Grind, attack action cards you control get when this defends clash with the attacking hero, the winner destroys the top card of the other hero's deck. So sort of Peck Perfect Light, but now it's on your defensive side with every attack action that you lay down. So you lay down Peck Perfect while Daily Grind's active, you're going to clash, grind them down, going to clash. So Daily Grind as well is just really nice. And the fact that, again, it's just a nice blue 3-block means it's not necessarily something you actually have to utilize, but at the end of the day, it's just 3-block value, right? So yeah, milling in Guardian is definitely going to go over a lot better than milling in Assassin. But what about discard? So again, we are seeing basically Guardian spin on these types of effect, which is definitely really nice. So we have put them in their place as a Velda spec, we have Hostile Encroachment, and we have Test of Iron Grip. So put it in the place for Velda is definitely mechanically really nice, synergizes with her whole ability really well. So Crush, when this deals 4 or more damage to a hero, they discard their hand, then they draw that many cards. So again, unlike Assassin, it's not just straight disruption because they're going to discard and they're going to get cards back. So whatever they've kept for their next turn, they're going to still be able to have, again, somewhat similar value in terms of how Flesh and Blood runs. But as Velda, that draw triggers your ability, so you get Seismic Surge tokens, which is really nice. It has Crush, so if you have 3 Seismic Surge, you can give this Dominate. And again, overall, just causing your opponent to discard or run through their deck at any sense of a quicker pace is going to help with that fatigue win condition. Hostile Encroachment, when this attacks a hero, they draw a card. Crush, when this deals 4 or more damage to a hero, they discard a card. So again, you're not really getting any extra value out of it. In fact, you're just getting your opponents an extra card to block with. But if you have Dominate, then at least you're getting that 1 card value. As Velda, you're still causing them to draw, so you get that Seismic Surge. So it is still somewhat useful, but, drops up a little bit because it is rare. But overall, I'm just really enjoying the Guardian spin on these types of effects. And then Test of Iron Grip is definitely a really solid 4-block card. When this defends clash with the attacking hero, if there is a winner, the other hero discards a card. So that is definitely really nice because it's a powerful block that could potentially have 7 value, right? Causing them to discard a 3-block card or 3 stat line or slightly higher even, right? So yeah, it being a 4-block is definitely really, really solid. And it makes sense that Guardian has this discard element on the defensive side because again, they are a very defensive deck running Fatigue over that of Assassin with mid-range. So yeah, the perspective of milling an Assassin is definitely correct because again, that lack of immediate payoff, right, definitely just does nothing for you. But that's not to say it's not salvageable if we just get things tuned in the right places to synergize with it. But as Guardian, milling definitely has a lot stronger of effect being, for the fatigue game. So yeah, let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed. And hopefully those spoilers come out and we can go through the rest of the cards. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah.